A bunch of ominous crows fly across a blood-red sky to set the mood. Our pink-haired MC is laid out on the ground, looking completely defeated. He wakes up, battered and bruised, wondering if he got knocked out. The MC sits up, questioning how long he was out, and if the battle is over. He clutches his chest, feeling the sharp pain of his injuries. My man does a quick self-diagnosis and confirms his ribs are broken. Despite being wrecked, he forces himself to stand, determined to keep fighting. He scans the devastated battlefield, looking for his party members. First, he spots the elf archer, slumped against a wall and clearly out of commission. Then he sees the party's golem shattered into a million pieces. The golem guy is pinned underneath his own destroyed summon. Not a good look. The talisman monk is still up, fighting two armored grunts with his fire magic. He looks focused and determined, holding his ground against the enemies. Meanwhile, the hero is in a standoff with the massive demon lord. The demon lord charges up his authority, a giant ball of purple energy. The hero stands his ground, sword glowing, ready for the incoming attack. A massive wave of dark energy erupts from the demon lord's position. A giant shadowy hand forms in the sky, about to crush everything. The demon lord summons an entire army of undead soldiers from the ground. The MC looks on in horror, realizing the boss just pulled out a necromancer build. The skull rogue is stunned, realizing the demon lord was holding back this power. He desperately screams for the priest to do something. The talisman monk responds, holding up a decapitated head and calling to the rogue. The skull rogue dives in, yelling for the monk to use his authority. The monk prays to the enlightened one, asking for a power-up for the team. He casts Authority of Light, a buff that lets them ignore pain. The skull rogue, now glowing, smashes into the undead with his new buff. The edgy rogue with dual swords flips into action, carving up the battlefield. He's completely surrounded by undead, but is effortlessly cutting them down. He unleashes a blinding flash of light from his blades. The attack creates a massive explosion, wiping out the nearby undead. The edgy rogue lands, telling the others he'll handle the small fry. He yells, "Go," giving the hero a clear shot at the demon lord. The hero acknowledges the opening and prepares to charge the main boss. The demon lord stands there menacingly, waiting for the hero's attack. The hero dashes forward at incredible speed, closing the distance instantly. He blocks a colossal downward swing from the demon lord's glowing purple sword. The hero and demon lord are locked in a brutal power struggle. The demon lord overpowers him, unleashing a flurry of energy slashes. The sheer scale of the demon lord's attack is overwhelming the entire area. The hero is getting pushed back and his armor is starting to shatter. He powers up with a final golden aura for one last desperate charge. The hero lands a direct explosive hit right in the demon lord's chest. The demon lord looks down as the hero is blown back from the impact. The hero lands, sword still smoking, and declares that it's over. He confidently calls out the demon lord, thinking he's secured the win. But purple tendrils erupt from the wound and instantly capture the hero. The demon lord's core glows brighter, saying the fight just continues. The hero realizes the demon lord is planning to self-destruct and take him with him. The edgy rogue suddenly appears from above, about to intervene. The edgy rogue holds his sword to the hero's throat, asking what the hell he's doing. He violently kicks the hero away from the demon lord's self-destruct attack. The edgy rogue faces the demon lord, telling him to take him instead. The skull rogue screams his name as the demon lord's energy detonates in a massive blast. A single concentrated ball of purple energy is all that remains after the explosion. The energy core drops into a pool of darkness, sending out ripples of power. A colossal black pillar called Execution of the Abyss erupts from the ground. The talisman monk stares in disbelief, questioning the nature of the dark pillar. A silhouette emerges from the dissipating dark energy, revealing the edgy rogue survived. The hero looks on, relieved that the edgy rogue is somehow still alive. The edgy rogue holds the demon lord's glowing purple core, having absorbed its power. The demon lord's body is shattered as he questions if this was all just fate. He wonders if the edgy rogue's sacrifice was just a meaningless death after all. The demon lord looks down, seemingly unimpressed by the rogue's survival. The newly powered-up edgy rogue lands a devastating punch, shattering the demon lord's face. He's shocked that the demon lord is still standing even after that direct hit. The demon lord regenerates, revealing he also has the right to receive succession. The edgy rogue gets pinned down by the demon lord's overwhelming power. He screams that now is the time, creating a final opening for the hero. The talisman monk buffs the hero with authority of light for the final attack. A golden slash cuts across the demon lord's multiple glowing eyes. The hero unleashes his ultimate move, the evil-slaying sword. His sacred sword, Ascalon, slices cleanly through the demon lord's torso. The demon lord is bisected, his arm and upper body completely severed. The two halves of the demon lord crash to the ground in a heap. The talisman monk rushes forward, asking if the hero and rogue are okay. The hero calls the monk over, kneeling beside the edgy rogue's body. The monk arrives to find the edgy rogue unconscious and heavily wounded. He's stunned to see the edgy rogue's body is already regenerating from the fatal damage. The monk asks the hero if the blessing worked, as they watch the demon lord fade. The exhausted hero looks over, asking if the demon lord is finally dead. The crumbling demon lord calmly tells the hero not to worry. He explains that his body has served its purpose and is now turning to dust. The demon lord concedes defeat, telling the hero and monk that this is their victory. His body continues to crack and disintegrate into particles of light and shadow. The demon lord's head falls off as he prepares to deliver his final message. He tells the hero his story is over, and that it's now the hero's turn to lead. He cryptically warns the hero of future despair and countless difficult choices. The demon lord continues his speech about the heavy weight of responsibility. His final piece of advice for the hero is simply to pray. He urges the hero to keep moving forward and never stop on his journey. The demon lord hopes the hero's journey has a better ending than his own. His essence splits into two streams of smoke that drift into the sky. The demon lord's physical form completely dissolves into dust and blows away. The dust scatters across the now quiet battlefield, marking the end of the fight. The hero, monk, and regenerating rogue are the only ones left standing. The hero and monk look up at the sky as the dark clouds finally part. The demon lord's core, a single pink crystal, ascends into the bright sun. A narrator confirms the end of the world-deciding battle as someone walks away. The entire party is celebrated with a massive victory parade through a cheering city. The city throws a massive party with confetti flying everywhere for the heroes. A narrator explains that everything after the battle was a complete blur. The talisman monk gets literally dragged back to magic school by the headmaster. The elf archer, looking buffer than ever, waves goodbye and heads for home. The priest girl gives a final prayer before leaving the secular world behind again. The hero, now in a fancy royal cape, bows his head for his coronation. A crown is placed on the hero's head, sealing his new role as king. The hero king raises his scepter to the adoring crowd, looking the part. Even the edgy rogue is seen smiling back in his village with his people. The narrator goes on about how evil vanished and life just went back to normal. A girl, likely the edgy rogue's sister, smiles happily, her scars finally gone. And then we get hit with a 150-year time skip because peace is boring. A mysterious cloaked figure is seen moving through a dark forest. It's the Skull Rogue, still alive and complaining while leaning against a tree. The Skull Rogue, now named Benlira, wonders if he's finally caught a cold after 150 years. He monologues about how the entire world has changed around him. He looks up at the sky, saying only the stars and himself have remained the same. A shooting star crosses the sky, right on cue for his dramatic moment. He realizes even the stars have changed, leaving him completely alone in his misery. He calls out the curse of immortality that's been tormenting him. He remembers the demon lord gave him this blessing that turned out to be a curse. He questions the point of immortality if he's just forced to exist forever. He continues his existential rant, asking what meaning there is in his endless life. He stares out at the mountains, feeling the crushing weight of being alone forever. A bright shooting star suddenly catches his attention, interrupting his brooding. A kid literally falls out of the sky and lands in the forest nearby. The blonde kid gets up and stares directly at the Skull Rogue. The narrator states that after 150 years, time has finally started to flow again. The Skull Rogue and the mysterious kid have a standoff in a clearing. The scene is set in a remote place called Tower Village on the Empire's outskirts. The narrator specifies they are located in the mountains behind the village. The kid and the Skull Rogue continue to stare each other down under the stars. The kid looks up in shock, finally realizing she's found a living skeleton. The Skull Rogue wonders what a kid is doing wandering around the woods at night. The kid, completely unafraid, reaches out and starts poking his skull mask. She gets star-eyed with excitement, yelling that she found a talking skeleton. He looks completely done as the kid keeps squishing his face. The kid grabs his hand, stopping him from pushing her away. The Skull Rogue complains that she's the first kid to poke him instead of running away. He asks her if anyone ever taught her to flee from non-human creatures. The kid proudly states she was taught not to judge things just by their looks. The Skull Rogue grumbles that his century-long emo phase was just ruined by this kid. The kid asks if he's a knight because of the weird sword he carries. He lies his ass off, claiming to be a messenger for the Emperor guarding the mountain. The kid totally buys it and gets excited, thinking he must be super strong. The Skull Rogue leans into the lie, puffing out his chest like he's important. He summons a tiny purple fox spirit to flex his high-level necromancy. The kid is completely amazed by the magic trick, still calling him Mister. She immediately asks him to be her master so she can get stronger too. The Skull Rogue's eyes glow, thinking this might be the cure for his eternal boredom. The kid pouts, correcting the Skull Rogue and telling him she's not a mister. The Skull Rogue just chills against a tree, completely ignoring the kid's request. The kid freaks out as the fox spirit tackles the Skull Rogue, who jumps up in surprise. The kid is now training with a stick, refusing to leave until he teaches her swordsmanship. He tries to send her home, worried he'll get accused of kidnapping a child. The kid casually dismisses his concerns, telling him not to worry about her parents. She drops a bombshell, revealing her house burned down and her parents died in the fire. The Skull Rogue is speechless as she explains her mom's last words were to get strong. She clenches her stick sword, yelling with fierce determination that she has to get stronger. The kid looks back with a confident smirk, basically guilt-tripping him into training her. A quick flash shows the Skull Rogue's human form, reminding us he wasn't always a skeleton. The Skull Rogue lets out a massive sigh, realizing he's completely lost this argument. He finally caves and agrees to teach her the sword, and the kid is absolutely thrilled. He calls himself a lady, and the kid is completely floored, asking if he's a woman. He just ignores the gender question while the kid celebrates getting her new master. As the kid trains, he monologues about the trials people face, getting all philosophical. He sees teaching her as his atonement for some past failure to deliver a message. The training montage kicks off with him effortlessly blocking her clumsy wooden sword strikes. They're shown resting against a tree together, looking surprisingly peaceful for once. He summons some gnarly purple demons for training while she casually snacks on the side. The training involves her getting chased by two ridiculous pink monsters as he watches. She suddenly whips out dual swords to fight the monsters, catching him off guard. We get a cute panel of him trying to teach her how to make a scary monster face. They team up to scare a random traveler, with his face hilariously pixelated for some reason. The traveler straight up faints, and the kid is ecstatic about their successful prank. They're back at the tree, but now she's asleep on his shoulder holding his hand. A close-up shows her hand holding his, a small moment of connection for the immortal loner. The two sit back to back, showing how their bond has grown over the years. The training has clearly paid off as she now spars with him on even ground. She strikes a powerful pose, showing off her impressive growth as a swordswoman. A montage shows her evolving from a clumsy kid to a skilled fighter in their spars. She confidently locks blades with him, grinning like she's finally caught up to her master. She has him on the defensive, and he looks up with a surprisingly proud expression. And boom, an 11-year time skip hits, showing someone swimming in a lake. The Skull Rogue calls out for the kid to come eat, holding up a freshly caught rabbit. A close-up reveals the kid is now a young woman, still calling him Mister. The kid is fully grown now, telling him she'll help prepare the food. A pot bubbles over the fire as she calls out to him with a serious tone. They sit by the campfire, and she tells him she has something serious to discuss. He's caught off guard by her serious mood, wondering what's gotten into her. She reveals that her former village is gone, completely abandoned by its people. She explains the Empire abandoned the frontier villages because of increasing monster attacks. He looks on grimly as she tells him that everyone has lost hope and given up. She looks at him with determination, stating that she's become strong thanks to him. He immediately calls her out, asking if her plan is to become a hero now. He tells her that after 11 years of training, he knows exactly what she's thinking. He reminisces about the hero, saying he had the same dream of helping people. He quotes the hero, saying no qualifications are needed to save people, hitting her right in the feels. He officially makes her his successor, presenting her with a proper short sword. He gives her one final piece of advice, to only ever draw her sword for a good reason. The Skull Rogue tells his student to go save the world and then come back. He promises that he'll always be waiting for her right there. The kid waves an enthusiastic goodbye, totally ready for her big hero adventure. The Skull Rogue waves back, already wondering how many years of waiting this will be. She walks off into the distance as he narrates that it's definitely going to take a while. He stands by their tree, accepting his new purpose is to guard this spot for her. He watches her run off, fully believing that his kid will save the world and return. A shot of his sword shows a vine growing on it, indicating a long time has passed. The narrator explains that being alone again isn't as frightening as it used to be. The Skull Rogue sits meditating as vines literally grow over his body and sword. A new kid shows up and asks if he's lost, and you just know this is going to be a problem. He gets annoyed, reminding the new kid that he's not a mister. The kid is back, lying on the ground, battered and bloody, but still greets him. The Skull Rogue looks down, completely shocked to see his student has returned in this state. She gives him a crazed grin, saying it's been a while since she's been home. A close-up on her leg shows it's been stitched up and is still bleeding. She starts laughing maniacally, telling him it was one hell of an amazing adventure. She recounts how huge the Empire was and all the new things she saw. She casually mentions fighting tons of monsters and helping people just like he taught her. But of course, the Emperor saw her as a threat for becoming a people's hero. She explains the Emperor ordered her execution for undermining his authority. Classic tyrant move. She stumbles forward and collapses into a hug with her old master. She admits she's feeling dizzy, finally letting the tough girl act drop for a second. She tries to joke, asking if he cried while she was gone, but she's clearly fading. She clutches his cloak, weakly asking to finally hear his story. She passes out in his arms before he can answer, her journey finally over. A close-up on the Skull Rogue's face shows he is absolutely not having this. His eye socket glows with that familiar purple necromancy. Someone's about to pay. A squad of Imperial Knights marches through the forest, clearly hunting for the kid. One knight complains about the hero bastard, while his commander tells him to shut it. A knight spots the Skull Rogue and yells at him to get off the mountain. "Wrong move, dude!" The Skull Rogue rips off his tattered shirt, questioning if this is just a mountain. Dark purple energy erupts from him as he asks if they still see this as a mountain. His skull mask cracks, revealing a glowing purple eye as he prepares to unleash hell. His sword glows with power, confirming this place is way more than just a mountain. The ground erupts as purple demons crawl out and attack the knights. The knights are immediately swarmed by the undead army he just summoned. He monologues that he found the remnants of the Demon Lord's army here 120 years ago. He explains that he slaughtered them all, turning this entire mountain into a graveyard. The corpses piled up and became the very soil of the forest. This is his domain. He says he's been guarding it from other necromancers, but now he's letting it all loose. The Knight Commander tries to rally his men, punching one of the undead creatures. He foolishly claims a single necromancer has a limit to how many undead they can control. The commander thinks they can win if they just wait it out. He's about to learn a lesson. He's met with the sight of an infinite sea of screaming purple souls. So much for limits. A masked figure in the background looks on in absolute terror at the sheer scale of it. The Skull Rogue's full undead army, including cavalry, charges the terrified knights. A purple-flamed undead warrior swings its scythe as the commander asks who he is. The commander gets his helmet and face sliced clean through by the undead warrior. The Skull Rogue stands with his massive sword, ready to reintroduce himself to the Empire. The Skull Rogue stands at the center of a massive crater of pure purple energy. He broadcasts his message across the land as a random kid listens in shock. The kid watches lightning crackle over the mountains, wondering what the hell is happening. The Skull Rogue continues his speech, warning the Empire about straying from its founder's will. A giant purple demon hand claws its way over a cliff, signaling the army's advance. He declares that nobles and retainers have the right to correct the Empire. My man is starting a civil war. The Skull Rogue is silhouetted against the red sky, overlooking his endless undead army. A mysterious new character in a feathered cloak stands ominously on a giant dragon skull. A map of the Empire burns, showing the origin point of his massive attack. The Skull Rogue vows his former homeland will pay the price for its tyranny. We get a POV shot of some poor soul running for their life through a field. The runner sees a village burning in the distance, right in the path of the invasion. He reaches for the village, thinking the soldiers there will save him. You sweet summer child. The soldiers are his undead army, and they immediately cut the runner down. A brutal montage shows the undead slaughtering villagers without a shred of mercy. An Imperial Knight gets impaled as a report comes in about the undead attack. A Knight Commander orders all standby units to assemble and face the horde. A knight holds up a weird purple blob saying sunflower and roasted potato. What? The blob screams XP-lusion as it's thrown. They've got sentient goddamn bombs. The explosion detonates, wiping out a chunk of the undead in a massive fireball. Demonic purple stingrays fly over the burning village because, of course, he has an air force. A knight correctly observes that this isn't the work of a simple necromancer. No shit. His partner confirms they're not facing a mage, they're facing an entire army. A new swordsman named Doan shows up and starts effortlessly carving through the undead. The knight commander tells his men to fall back and let the new guy handle it. Doan gets into his Doan-style fighting stance, ready to take on the horde alone. A close-up shows Doan's intense focus as he prepares to unleash his skills. He cleanly decapitates one of the purple undead with a single fluid slash. Doan leaps into the air using his wolf hunt technique on a pack of shadow beasts. He exhales a cloud of smoke, looking completely unfazed by the chaos around him. Doan stands victorious among the fallen undead, his massive sword glowing with power. A buff Imperial Knight named Isher Soma questions what kind of person this necromancer is. Isher Soma gives a grim look, realizing the sheer scale of the enemy force. He spots a giant, flaming undead creature looming over the village rooftops. Isher Soma points out the giant, identifying it as their primary target. The giant undead stares down at the battlefield, clearly a high-level boss summon. The Skull Rogue is revealed, riding on the giant's shoulder like an absolute king. Isher Soma is shocked to see the necromancer commanding from a giant purple hand. He notes that a mage fighting on the front lines is breaking all the rules. Doan grips his sword, preparing to charge the necromancer's position directly. A low, sweeping slash takes out the legs of two undead soldiers at once. The giant undead, also labeled Doan style, gets its legs cut out from under it. The Skull Rogue gets hit in the leg as his giant summon starts to collapse. Doan's Wolf Cloud technique is revealed as a whirlwind of slashes at ground level. The Skull Rogue is grabbed by his own collapsing summon, caught in the attack. The giant and its minions are all shown using the exact same Doan style. The Skull Rogue looks at his burning leg, realizing the attack only targets the legs. He flashes back to his student's bandaged and bleeding leg, making a horrifying connection. The Skull Rogue's eyes glow with purple light as he asks if the swordsman is his student. He looks up as Isher Soma grits his teeth, the battlefield about to get way more personal. The Skull Rogue's giant summon collapses, crushing the village below. He leaps from the falling giant, launching himself directly at the swordsman Doan. The Skull Rogue blocks Doan's glowing sword, getting right in his face. Doan looks completely focused, not backing down from the skeletal menace. The Skull Rogue throws a punch while their blades are locked, no honor in this fight. Doan dodges the punch and prepares a swift counter-slash with his blade. He unleashes a wide, glowing arc, aiming for the Skull Rogue's legs again. The Skull Rogue gets kicked square in the leg. Oh, the irony is delicious. Doan clutches his own leg in pain, surprised by the force of the blow. The Skull Rogue retaliates with a brutal overhead sword strike to Doan's head. He looks absolutely unhinged, black tears streaming from his skull mask. He unleashes a vicious flurry of punches, beating Doan into the ground. The Skull Rogue grips his purple sword, preparing for a finishing blow. He brings the massive blade down in a devastating overhead smash. The impact creates a blinding flash of light, obliterating the ground. Doan somehow dodges and lands softly, looking completely unscathed. He wipes blood from his mouth, calling the Skull Rogue a monster bastard. Doan boasts that he hasn't been pushed this hard since fighting the Four Knights. The Skull Rogue simply calls himself a vengeful ghost, ice cold. Doan realizes he needs to stall for time and decides to provoke him further. He taunts the Skull Rogue, asking whose pathetic revenge he's even fighting for. The Skull Rogue says they've killed so many people he wouldn't know where to start. A narrator explains that necromancy drains a massive amount of stamina. Doan smirks, thinking he just needs to wait for the Skull Rogue to burn out. The Skull Rogue's hand suddenly appears right beside Doan's face. Too slow, buddy. He gets stabbed clean through the chest before he can even react. The Skull Rogue grabs his face, asking if he's proud of killing people. He crushes Doan's jaw, accusing him of killing for worthless power. He reveals they killed his student, his child, and now it's personal. The Skull Rogue continues to crush Doan's face with his bare hand. Doan's eye widens in shock as he finally understands who he's dealing with. He looks up in terror as the Skull Rogue's sword comes down to finish him. The Skull Rogue's attack shatters Doan's sword into pieces. Doan is sent flying back, crashing into a pile of rubble completely wrecked. He calls the Skull Rogue a monster and tells him to keep whining. Doan justifies the kid's death as a necessary sacrifice for the Empire's cause. The Skull Rogue calls him a bastard and says his death is now necessary too. Doan just laughs, saying not today, as his plan finally comes together. A massive beam of blue light erupts from the mountain in the distance. The Skull Rogue looks up, sensing the powerful magic being activated. Multiple beams of holy light shoot down from the sky over the village. The Empire's trap is revealed, a massive anti-undead barrier powered by severed hands. Doan grins through his bloody teeth, declaring his mission complete. The anti-undead protection barrier activates with a massive surge of power. A shockwave of holy energy expands from the mountain peak. The energy forms a giant, glowing cross in the sky above the battlefield. The barrier expands into a massive wave, about to purify the entire area. The Skull Rogue's purple undead army looks up in absolute terror. One of the undead creatures begins to disintegrate as the holy energy hits it. Imperial Knights stand ready as the barrier begins to wipe out the undead horde. The Imperial Knights celebrate as the holy light barrier purifies the entire undead army. Doan smirks through the blood, telling the Skull Rogue his entire army is gone. He reveals the barrier was made by the hero's party's mage, hitting him with his own past. The Skull Rogue, getting disintegrated, just calmly says he's well aware of that fact. He flashes back to the golem guy, remembering his old comrade's insane crafting skills. Doan is completely baffled that the Skull Rogue isn't freaking out right now. The Skull Rogue says the army is replaceable because the Empire created his new soldiers. He declares that all the oppressed citizens will now rise up to join his revenge. With glowing purple eyes, the Skull Rogue vows to bring the entire Empire to ruin. A flashback shows the original hero's party as the narrator says they all hated war. The party is shown fighting through a desolate landscape where death was just normal. He remembers thinking they had finally ended that era with the hero's coronation. The image of the triumphant hero king shatters, symbolizing the failure of their ideals. The Skull Rogue's silhouette walks across the broken memory of their hard-won peace. He questions what the point of all their sacrifices was if it just led to this. His silhouette looks down, admitting that he just doesn't know the answer anymore. He stands alone in a bleak, empty landscape, lost without his old comrades. He questions his own feelings and motivations from when he first went to war. He continues his existential crisis, asking who he was even fighting for back then. He wonders where he's supposed to go now that everyone from his past is gone. His silhouette walks into a white void, completely lost on what path to take. We jump to a snowy adventurer village 4 days after the kid's murder. The Skull Rogue, cloaked, holds a map in a tavern and asks for directions. He asks the entire Adventurers Guild if someone could point him in the right direction. A scruffy adventurer tells him this is a guild, not a damn information booth. The Skull Rogue says it's the only place open and he'll leave once he gets help. A big, shirtless adventurer gets up, pissed off at the Skull Rogue's shamelessness. The scruffy adventurer stops his buddy, sensing that this stranger is bad news. He points out that for a simple lost wanderer, the Skull Rogue smells of blood. The scruffy adventurer brings up a recent rumor about a necromancer on a rampage. He mentions the necromancer came from Tower Village, connecting the dots to our boy. The scruffy adventurer gives the Skull Rogue a very pointed and suspicious glare. He throws a dagger at the Skull Rogue's back to test his theory. The adventurer asks if the Skull Rogue is the necromancer from the rumors. Another adventurer reveals a skull mask and yells "Undead," outing the Skull Rogue. The Skull Rogue is revealed under his hood, looking absolutely done with this bullshit. The adventurer who outed him tells him he should have picked his opponents more carefully. The adventurer attacks but gets sent flying into a wall by the Skull Rogue. The scruffy adventurer just smirks, completely unfazed by his companion getting wrecked. The Skull Rogue stands over the defeated adventurer, who's now part of the wall. The scruffy adventurer notes the Skull Rogue sensed their ambush and is impressed. He orders his 2 remaining goons to attack and kill the Skull Rogue. The Skull Rogue complains that all he did was ask for some simple directions. He cracks his knuckles, declaring that this beatdown is now entirely their fault. The big shirtless goon leaps in with a sword, screaming for him to die. The Skull Rogue casually blocks the massive overhead swing with his tiny dagger. He unleashes a rapid-fire purple eye beam, peppering the goon's chest with hits. The big goon looks down in absolute shock at the damage he just took. The Skull Rogue dodges a punch from the big goon as another fighter watches. The second goon prepares to strike with his own sword, joining the one-sided fight. The second goon swings his sword as the Skull Rogue blocks it with his forearm. The goon is stunned as the Skull Rogue catches his blade with his bare hand. The Skull Rogue grabs the goon's face because that's his signature move now. He effortlessly lifts the goon off the ground by his head. The Skull Rogue slams the goon into the floor, creating a massive crater. He stands over the wreckage, his back turned to the remaining fighters. The Skull Rogue slowly turns his head, looking back at the last few idiots. He fully turns around, his skull mask looking completely unimpressed by this guild. A close-up on his face shows he's just bored with this whole encounter. The scruffy adventurer and his last buddy look up, finally realizing they messed up. The Skull Rogue does a spinning kick, disarming both of them at once. The scruffy adventurer is completely shocked by his opponent's impossible speed. He lands and smashes both of their heads into the ground simultaneously. The two goons are left smoking in craters as the scruffy adventurer looks on. The scruffy adventurer looks around, wondering where the Skull Rogue disappeared to. The Skull Rogue appears behind him, a shadowy figure with a glowing purple eye. The scruffy adventurer blocks a strike, revealing the Skull Rogue is now wearing a fur cloak. The scruffy adventurer gets a determined look, showing he's not just another goon. He unleashes a named attack, Fang Strike, a powerful glowing slash. The Skull Rogue's eye glows purple, ready to counter the flashy move. The scruffy adventurer is shocked as the Skull Rogue catches his sword mid-swing. He explains his right-hand stab is just a feint, trying to be clever. He reveals his real attack is a wide slash from his left side. The Skull Rogue's after image gets hit as the real one is already behind him. The scruffy adventurer is stunned, realizing he's been completely outplayed. The Skull Rogue lands a devastating punch, sending the adventurer flying. Two other adventurers in the background can't believe what they're seeing. The scruffy adventurer is buried in rubble, one-shotted by the Skull Rogue. The Skull Rogue stands in the smoke, having cleared the entire room of trash. The remaining adventurers are terrified, wondering who's next on the chopping block. A new masked character asks who the Skull Rogue is as he prepares to intervene. A blonde man on a balcony tells him to stop, offering to give him what he wants. The other adventurers realize he was just asking for directions this whole time. The blonde man introduces himself as Thor Vinland, the guild master. A title card confirms he's the master of the northernmost guild, Garm. They're now in the guild master's office having a much more civil chat. The guild master brings up the old rumor of a skeleton living near Tower Village. He explains they sent search parties but found nothing, thinking it was just a story. The Skull Rogue sits in a chair as the guildmaster laughs, amused the rumor is real. The guildmaster's smile fades as he gets a more serious look on his face. The Skull Rogue crushes the wooden armrest, stating he's not in a patient mood. His skull mask glows purple as he tells the guildmaster to get to the point. The guildmaster says his request is simple, trying to de-escalate the situation. He explains that the Empire has neglected their guild for a very long time. He lights a cigarette, monologuing about how his people are suffering and dying. He finishes his sob story by saying they're all just waiting to die. The Skull Rogue calls him out, saying they should have resisted the Empire. He drops some cold hard truth, saying if you do nothing, nothing will ever change. The guildmaster claims it's not that they didn't do anything to fight back. He admits with a grim look that they were completely powerless to do anything. The narrator explains that adventurers had to step up and protect their own homes, so the Empire just dipped and left everyone to die. Cool. The Skull Rogue asks the guildmaster if they ever thought about uniting the guilds. My man's trying to start a full-blown revolution. The guildmaster scoffs at the idea, saying that would just lead to war. Yeah, no shit, that's kind of the point. He claims it's not about courage, but about the people who would die. Sounds like a convenient excuse for doing nothing. The guildmaster admits they just sat around waiting for a hero to save them. So their grand plan was to just hope for the best. He whines about how they desperately survived just waiting for hope to show up. A whole lot of waiting, not a lot of doing. He reveals that a hero did eventually appear to give them that hope. And we all know who he's talking about. A flashback shows the kid hailed as the hero by the people she saved. His student really became a legend out there. The guildmaster says they thought she could save them all from their despair. They put all their eggs in one basket, a classic mistake. He gets all emo, wondering where it all went wrong with their false hope. It went wrong when the Emperor killed her, dude. The guildmaster's eyes glow blue as he says he realized what they were missing. Hatred. This dude just went from pacifist to supervillain in 2 seconds. A dark silhouette with glowing red eyes says war is about killing, even if you die. The guildmaster has officially entered his villain arc. The Skull Rogue clenches his fist, ready to make his request. He's found his new army of pissed-off adventurers. The guildmaster immediately agrees to send 2 adventurers and provide full support. This dude is all in on the revenge tour. He tells the Skull Rogue he doesn't care if he's a demon or a ghost. Desperation makes for strange bedfellows. The guildmaster and another adventurer literally bow, begging to be included in his war. Well, that was easy. The Skull Rogue just stands there silently, probably thinking how easy it is to recruit angry people. He apologizes for wrecking the guild and accepts some blame for the Empire's neglect. A rare moment of accountability from our boy. He slaps a red tag on the table, saying it's been 150 years since he took a request. He's officially back in business. The guildmaster looks at the tag, completely stunned by what he's seeing. He's finally realizing who he's dealing with. He identifies it as a Ruby-class adventurer tag, the highest rank from the Great War. Yep, he's a literal living legend. The guildmaster finally asks who the hell he is. The penny has officially dropped, my guy. The Skull Rogue brushes it off, calling himself an ugly ghost from the past. Still committed to the emo brand, I see. He accepts the request and says their first stop is the Northern Mountain Range. The war for revenge has begun. The Skull Rogue is already running through the snow, wasting absolutely no time. A map shows Ben Lyra's route from the guild, heading back toward his old turf. A shot of the snowy mountains as someone asks how long they've been traveling. A new red-haired adventurer with goggles says it's been 5 days of sneaking around. The red-haired adventurer scouts ahead as the Skull Rogue comments on their fast pace. The Skull Rogue looks down at the snowy landscape, agreeing that they're moving quickly. He spots an armed camp below, asking what those bastards are doing there. Trouble's brewing. A close-up on the knights reveals they aren't a search party chasing them, so they're just random assholes. A second spiky-haired adventurer identifies them as looters and survivors from Tower Village. The spiky-haired adventurer points out on a map that they're isolated Imperial remnants, and they're clearly not ready for winter. The Skull Rogue asks the spiky-haired guide what's down the lower path. He's already planning something. The red-haired adventurer gets pissed, telling him to use their names, Moran Same and Sword Harrier. Moran Same explains that the soldiers will probably raid the small settlements below for supplies. Sword Harrier confirms that Imperial Knights pillaging villages is just a normal Tuesday for them. He adds that it's been routine since the current Emperor took over. The Hero King's legacy is a damn mess. The Skull Rogue, cloaked in shadow, calmly states that he needs to kill them. No debate, just a statement of fact. Sword Harrier looks over, completely shocked by the casual murder declaration. He asks what the hell he just said as the Skull Rogue drops a glowing object off the cliff. Murin Same and Sword Harrier look on in absolute shock and confusion. They have no idea what their new boss is capable of. The object explodes in the camp below, sending soldiers flying. That's one way to say hello. The Imperial Knights scramble, wondering if they're being raided. You're goddamn right you are. The Skull Rogue, glowing with purple energy, confirms that it is in fact a raid. His new companions watch from above, as Sword Harrier correctly points out that he's already dead. The knights identify the Skull Rogue as the necromancer from Tower Village as he charges in. His reputation is spreading fast. He becomes a blur of purple energy, effortlessly tearing through the armored soldiers. The Skull Rogue continues his one-man slaughter, a whirlwind of blades and dark magic. This is going to be a short fight. An Imperial Knight's helmet cracks as he sees the face of death charging at him. The narrator gives this beatdown a title, Military Supply Slaughter. Accurate. A female knight tries to rally the troops, but her men are already screaming for their lives. The female knight's eyes go wide with shock as the Skull Rogue closes in on her. The Skull Rogue one-shots the knight and her horse in a single brutal slash. He holds up her severed head, sarcastically asking if she was the only one. He taunts the remaining soldiers, asking if their eyes are just for show. He summons a wall of screaming purple souls just to rub it in. Classic intimidation. His purple demon army leaps into the fray, and the real slaughter begins. Moran Same and Sword Harrier realize the guild beatdown wasn't even his full power. A close-up of a screaming purple demon shows exactly what the knights are facing. The purple demons start ripping the Imperial Knights to absolute shreds. The Skull Rogue is now riding a demonic horse, just supervising the massacre. He officially names himself the Ghost of Tower Village, building his own legend. Moran Same tells Sword Harrier it's almost over and time for them to join the party. The Skull Rogue sits on his purple steed, looking like the goddamn Grim Reaper. He declares the tide has turned as his undead horde closes in for the kill. One of his demons grabs a knight's head, ready to crush it like a grape. A lone knight with a death wish charges him, screaming his head off. The Skull Rogue's demon horse blocks the spear with a casual, glowing kick. He leaps off his mount, ready to personally end this last fool's career. He delivers a flying kick that makes the knight's entire head explode. A glowing medallion appears on his chest, planted there mid-kick. Slick move. The knight's head disintegrates, revealing he was wearing the same medallion. A flashback shows a villager giving him a charm as an apology for being suspicious. The Skull Rogue, in a past encounter, asks what the charm is for. The villager admits they were wary of him because of his appearance. He explains his daughter made the charm for adventurers' safe return. The Skull Rogue accepts, but the villager says thanking his daughter is impossible. He reveals Imperial troops killed his daughter 2 years ago. Another victim. The villager says everyone there is just like him, broken and hating the Empire. He calls them all human butchers living only for revenge. This is getting dark. The villager warns the Skull Rogue not to ruin his life with revenge like they did. He tells him everyone has someone waiting for them, hitting a very sore spot. Back in the present, the knight he just killed is revealed to be that same villager. The villager knight falls off a cliff, screaming as the Skull Rogue watches him go. The Skull Rogue and his demon stand over the dying man. This is a new low. He looks at his hand, quietly apologizing for killing a man he just met. The dying knight calls out for his daughter Michelle. God damn, this is brutal. The Skull Rogue stands over the corpse as his demon waits for its next order. He turns to his own purple demon minion, looking absolutely pissed off. He one-punches his own summon, taking out his grief and rage on it. His companions arrive and congratulate him on the good work. They have no idea. Sword Harrier asks if he needs the corpses for his army. Read the room, dude. The Skull Rogue just stares at his own bloody fist, completely ignoring them. A massive fire rages as his companions call him a strange fellow, understatement of the century. They ask if he wants them to cremate the bodies since he doesn't need them. The Skull Rogue clenches his fist, saying he'll handle the cleanup himself. He unleashes a wave of purple energy, incinerating every last body on the field. He stands alone in the purple inferno, a man haunted by his own vengeance. The Skull Rogue stands alone in the snow, watching the massive funeral pyre he created. Moran Same watches him, commenting that he doesn't know who this revenge is for. Sword Harrier adds that the Skull Rogue has a very sad expression. Even his new goons can see he's broken. The Skull Rogue stares into the massive inferno, lost in his own destructive thoughts. A shadowy voice taunts him, reminding him that it's now his turn to suffer. The voice warns him of countless choices and a despair he's never known. It continues, saying the real despair hasn't even begun for him yet. The Skull Rogue confronts a multi-eyed purple entity, telling it to stay dead and shut up. The purple entity just laughs maniacally, clearly enjoying his suffering. The entity calls him a hypocrite and tells him to try and fight against his fate. The entity looms over him, promising a future of unimaginable despair. This is not helping. It tells him to run from fate as he stands before the pyre, his sword at his side. We cut to a burning castle as a lone rider approaches. The Empire's got other problems. A new red-haired woman with a crown hums, enjoying the tasty screams of the conquered. She grins with shark teeth, saying the smell of burning is good. We've found our next psycho. A knight asks Lady Frey if she wants to play soccer with a princess's head. Her whole crew is nuts. Frey declines, complaining that the kingdom fell too easily and she's bored. She whines, asking if any crazy bastard will pick a fight with the Empire. Oh, you have no idea. A messenger arrives calling for War Knight Frey and her army. Perfect timing. The messenger delivers the Emperor's order to subjugate the necromancer at the northern barrier. Frey gets a massive, creepy grin on her face. She just found her new favorite toy. She calls the Skull Rogue a crazy bastard for showing up right when she was bored. Frey kicks off her crown and orders her troops to assemble. It's playtime for the Murder Queen. Her troops' armored feet march forward in unison, ready for a new war. Frey stands with her massive sword before her army, declaring it's time for war.